So the High Lamas of Tibet all work with Dharma protectors together simultaneously. But remember, Dharma protector practice is not something we openly talk about, we openly promote or say or do, because Dharma protector practices are secret tantra. Unless you're extremely qualified, you don't run around, oh, what's your protector? What's your yidam? You never talk about that. Why? The minute you talk about it, the authenticity is gone, the blessing is gone. Because the very reason for us to practice in secrecy is not made up by the lamas, it is made up by Buddha, Vajradhara. So whatever protector practice you're practicing, whatever, it should be very secret. It is secret not because you're doing anything wrong or not because anything is bad. It is secret because that is the requirements of Tantra. And even more secret than your protector is your yidam. Very, 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 very secret. And until you attain a stage where your attainments cannot go backward, then you can reveal. Nobody knew Lama Tsongkhapa practiced Vajrayogini till he passed away. After he passed away, they went through his holy things and they found Vajrayogini images in his texts. Otherwise, nobody knew during his lifetime he even practiced Vajrayogini. That's how he kept it. Because his yidam was Guhya Samaja, Yamataka, Hiruka, Kalachakra. That was his main yidams. And Vajrayogini was his secret yidam, which he never ever revealed. It was so secret, no one knew till he passed away and they found things about her in his items. And that's why Lama Tsongkhapa became a Buddha, because he kept the precepts of Tantra. So I'll be frivolous and fun and I'll be easy on anything except Dharma. With Dharma, I'm very conservative, I'm very strict, and I'm very straightforward. Why? I don't have the authority to twist things around. I don't have the authority to bend things around or make up new things or make up new lineages. I don't have that authority. I don't have the attainments. I'm just a Dharma teacher. So I dare not twist things. So if my holy lamas like Trijang Rinpoche and Song Rinpoche and all these great lamas say to keep it private and secret, I will follow that. I will follow. I will do what I like. And so I had no conflicts with that. So in our Dharma Center, it's very, very important to follow the precepts of Tantra. Why? Then we'll get results. We'll get results. Very simple. Very, very simple. And to have holy images of our yidam, to have holy images of our protector is very, very important. If our protector happens to be, if our protector is Satrap and happens to be the protector of the center, then it's okay. If people say, oh, what's your protector Satrap, it's no problem. But if it's not something of the center and you talk about it, it's not very good. Why? It goes away from your practice. And so what happens is that we should have big images in our centers. We should have as big as images we can of the deities. Do you know why? It's not providing for one person or two persons. It's providing for many. And it's an opportunity for many to collect merit. When we make large images of deities in the center, we purify many, many, many negative karmas we've collected with our body. Many, many, many. And each time someone prostrates, we purify negative karma of our body. It's very powerful. So how big the image? We should never be scrawny or miserly or cheapskates about buying images or calculative. Why? How can you be calculative about your enlightenment? How can you be calculative about your karma? How can you be calculative about your merits? How can you be? So you should get the most highest quality images, the best images, the most beautiful. And if you can't afford it, fundraise. I've offered images of centers all around the world, and I still do that. Why? Because I know the benefits behind it. I've been taught. And even if you don't know the benefits, believe the lamas. There are benefits. You should get the best images, the biggest, and don't be calculated. And when you ask for images, never ask for a discount. Never. It says that in the vows of refuge. Never bargain for a Buddha image. Never. Because you devalue it. If you're paying $10 for it and you get it for $8, you save $2, but also you save $2 on your merit. And every single day thereon. Don't think of it as a possession. It's not. It's inviting holy object home. So if you have the fortune to have a big image, or to come across a big image, to have the opportunity to offer to a center, to offer to people, to give to people, you should. And then when you purchase and acquire these holy images, they should be your priority to pay them off immediately, beyond your other bills. Why? That's what it says in Refuge. When you delay, you're making that object as if it is your possession, not an object of refuge, just a possession. We can make part payment and bills on cars. We can drag our payments out on clothes and trips, credit cards. But this is a Buddha image. You're buying from a holy organization. How can you drag the payments out? How can you not pay? How can you be manipulative? How can you be sneaky? How can you be calculative? How can you make Dharma people chase you for a Dharma image and pay up? Cannot. I say this with respect to everyone because I'm on film. It benefits everybody around the world. I'm not pinpointing. I don't pinpoint. Contrary to what some people may believe, I do not pinpoint. I give Dharma talks. So what happens is, for Dharma images, should be paid off immediately. Never ask for discount. Never talk about it as if it's an object. Never. Always treat it as it's a living, holy being. And put it in the best place and pay the best amount. In fact, I know some people that go into KMT and they actually don't want the discount. They don't want the discount back and say, no, thank you. It's a Dharma organization. I offer it to you. I know they know the Dharma already. I don't ask for discounts. Even when I go to the stores, from my own personal stores, when I buy, I don't ask for discounts. You say, but it's your it doesn't make a difference. It's not my statues. Buddhas don't belong to me. So if I have the merits, have sponsors that give me money, then I can buy statues. I buy from my own stores. It helps to maintain them. Why? I'm not opening those stores to make money. I don't make money. I open those stores to promote holy Buddha images to everyone in this city, in this country, and especially of our holy lineage, which is very hard to find. Very hard to find. Very hard. So when we support these Dharma stores, when we interact and we buy and we help these Dharma stores, we're making our lineage grow and spread. As simple as that. So don't talk about it. We never ask for discounts. We never ask for anything. And if we have to go on part payment, yes, we do it and we make it as less as possible. We don't wait every month. We go and pay it off as soon as possible. I used to do that in America because I bought Manjushri statues on part payment and I pay it off as soon as I can. Even if I don't have enough food to eat, whatever, it doesn't matter because images to me are very holy. And when we treat images like that, the benefits are tremendous. I'll talk about that another day. Tremendous. So images are very holy. And we should treat it holy, and we should talk about it holy. We can make these, we can bargain, we can talk about discounts, whatever, with cars and items and possessions and jewelry, not Buddha images. And the Buddha images should be as big as possible, especially for Dharma centers. And whose Dharma center, it doesn't matter. If you have bias toward which Dharma center, then you're not practicing Dharma. Whether you like the people at Dharma center or not, it doesn't matter. If they have an image and they collect merit, when they collect merit, their mind will change. When their mind changes, they become your friends. Why? They collect the merit to change their minds. So who has the Dharma images? Who has whatever? It doesn't matter. If we have the money, if we can raise the money and we can offer it to other people, offer it with no attachments, with no fame, with no 8 worldly concerns. Offer it for them to collect merit. Because wherever there are large images of holy beings, especially Lama Tsongkhapa, the whole place becomes calm. Harmony grows. Students are attracted. Ill will inside dissolve. Finances grow. Learning grow. And attainments grow wherever there's a large image of Lama Tsongkhapa, whether it's on our altars, whether it's in our centers, wherever it is. If we were to have one image, we should have Lama Tsongkhapa. Why? You say, why not Buddha? Because Lama Tsongkhapa is a manifestation of Buddha in a form of increasing wisdom, compassion, knowledge. In fact, many places in Tibet, if you go on the net, the largest images of Buddhas are Lama Tsongkhapa. Huge, 37 meters or whatever, all over Tibet. Why? In places that are no calm, wild, cannot grow, they put Lama Tsongkhapa there and the place grows. So putting a huge, beautiful Lama Tsongkhapa image in the center makes the center grow, increase in volume, in learning, in material needs, and especially in the happiness of the place, because Lama Tsongkhapa is a direct opponent of depression that arises from the self-cherishing mind. We should never be stingy and calculative about that. Never. And then we should have images of our lineage lamas like Trijang Rinpoche. Not our gurus. Gurus' pictures, not images. It's inauspicious when our guru is alive to have an image of him. It's considering he's dead. But in the modern age, it's okay. Dalai Lama made an exception. Basically, images of our holy lineage lamas. When we have images of our lineage lamas in our center or in our altars or our place, you know what happens? We're creating an environment for our current lamas to live long, to grow, to be auspicious, because we need their lamas to bless them. Oh, we don't put the image, we're going to bless you, Lama. That's why we put your Lama there. No. It's not that kind of attitude. And then we should have images and statues of the yidams and deities of the 4 classes of Tantra, whatever we can put, as an object of merit for people, to make merit grow. And of course, in our center, whatever our Dharma protector is, we should have an image. We should have an image, and we have sponsors in our Dharma center who have money. Don't be stingy. Buy 10 images, 12 images, 15, 20, 30, and distribute it and give it away. Why? They don't benefit, you benefit. Because each time they pray, you get the merit. Be sincere about your lineage and your practice. Be sincere. Never be stingy. Never. I have a very special love for images since I was very young. Since I was very, very young, I've been drawing images of Buddhas. Since I was very, very young, I've been making images of Buddhas. Oh, I'll show you guys one. Do you know where it is? You can get it? You got my key? Huh? Yeah, go over there quick. Since I was very young, because some of my things came from America. I found this by accident the other day. They put it away nicely. Since I was very, very young, I would draw images of Buddhas and make amulets and make chains or whatever and give to people to wear for protect. I would make all kinds of images. So it was something with me that no one taught me I did when I was a very young child. In any case, my point is, we should buy, we should give. We shouldn't think, oh, you don't have the money, cannot. You should. And then you should look for people in the center. You should look for people in the community who need Dharma images, who need Buddhas, who need Tsongkhapas, your Dharma protectors, and look for a place and look for an opportunity to give. And never think, oh, my salary is this much, I can't. No. Do it on part payment. Do it. We do it for cars. We do it for houses. Why not for Buddha? Why not? It's for object of offering. Never be stingy and cheap. Go all the way. This is something I practiced my whole life. This is not something is recent. Never. Anybody who has known me for the last 10 years, they will know how I am. I give away $100,000 to $200,000 worth of images a year to people, to centers and people all the time. Non-stop. Why? I know the benefits for them. I know the benefits for me. It purifies karma. In fact, we have a practice in preliminaries to make 100,000 tsatsas. 100,000 Buddha images to purify the negativities of our body. Always very important. So images help us do that. We can make 100,000 tsatsas. You know, maybe we can make a big Buddha that's 10, 20, 30. We can count it together. We should. And those of us who have financial resources do it, we should find open places or do places or support places that sell images, that have images, to try to finish 100,000 images in our lifetime. Isn't that wonderful? Before you die, I was the cause of 100,000 Buddha images or more to be brought into people's homes. Wow. In your next life, you will have my body. Mine. And if you put gold on those images, if you have gold, you will have Kandarohi's skin, not mine, because mine's, well, let's put it this way. Snow tires got to it first, but never mind. So if you make 100,000 Buddha images this life before you die, in your next life, you will have a body like the Dalai Lama's, magnificent, Sikji Chenpo, glorious and awe-inspiring, and that every movement brings benefit to others. Every movement. Definitely. Making images is a Dharma practice, not an activity. It is Dharma practice. That's why in Tibet we do 100,000 tsatsas. 100,000. So if we can't buy big images for people, oh God, buy the tsatsas, give it away. For your birthday, friend, look for people, look for victims. What do you have on your altar? Oh, you just have a teeny little Tsongkhapa, run to the store, get a big one, give it to them. That's what I do. Always. Don't be stingy on statues, don't be stingy on practice. I'm not. This is taught by the great lamas. All great lamas practice this. All great lamas. And never be stingy. Never, never, ever. I got into bringing holy images of my lineage into Malaysia because when I came to Malaysia, I didn't find it. I couldn't find things that I needed anywhere. It was very difficult. So I started it. I get 5% of profit from all the stores. The 5% does not go in my pocket. I roll it back in. I got my first check, 5%. You don't want to know how much it is. Yes, it's 4 figures. But never mind. It's auspicious because I offer it to my protector, and I'll offer that back. I dare not use the money, never, because it comes from the Dharma. Never. Never. So our Dharma stores must grow. Our Dharma stores must increase. If I catch Paris buying incense anywhere else, she will get abused. Not used, just abused. Use, she wants. If I catch Mr. Kong running around to some Mahayana store buying a little porcelain Kuan Yin at a discount, he will be slapped so hard his glasses will land in China. And if I see anybody with a big space, a big table, and they buy a teeny little Tsongkhapa take home, I will be there with a guillotine. Big ones. And if I see Dharma centers around here that don't have big statues, and there are people there who can afford it, they will get a from me. Because, I'll use my clairvoyant powers to see how much is in their bank account. Clairvoyant. There I go, contradicting myself again. Don't talk about it, don't have it, and then I say I do, da-da-da. Mr. Ngang's like, I wonder if he knows how much I have. And his wife is sitting there, he doesn't know. He's BSing. Because your money's in a safe that's made of lead wad. Superman cannot see through lead wad. And Mrs. Ngang's like, don't worry. And he's like, but, this is a different type of Superman. He's not from Krypton. He's from Tibet. Mrs. Ngang's like, is this Dharma talk or tease me to death session? I like ya. You have this face that says, entertain me, bring attention to me. I don't know why. These are some things that I kept. These are things that when I was very young, I was 10, 11, 12 years old in New Jersey that I made, and I carried with me when I ran across America. I hitchhiked from New Jersey to New York, from New York to Los Angeles, and I carried these things with my bag. And I made these when I was very young. See, this is a little Buddha, Shakyamuni, I drew when I was very young. And I drew many. I drew Vajradaras, I drew Taras, Manjushri, Tsongkhapa. I used to draw this just freehand all the time and give away to people. I used to win contests for drawing. And then this is fabulous. I forgot I had this, but I do. Look at that. I used to make pendants. I made this when I was, I remember in Lakewood, New Jersey. I must have been about 12 or 13. I made this beautiful green tar pendant, and I put plastic over it. And I, made it like that so that when people travel, I can give it to them, and they'll be protected. I remember doing that. So I used to make manjushris and taras at a very young age. Like I said, no one told me. I just felt I'd have to do this. One thing is I used to pretend teaching Dharma to people, a pretend audience. I always remember wearing pretend things and pretending I was a Dalai Lama. I was silly, isn't it? That's really silly. Anyway, I sit on a big throne, a bed, and pretend I was teaching a huge audience and give Dharma talks and have all kinds of mudras, when someone walked in, I'd be like, and pretend. Or I would make pendants like this. And with my little hands and little tape, and this is quite good actually, with saran wrap. And I make a whole bunch and give to people. People just threw it away. They're like, you're crazy. I ain't going to wear that piece of paper with some weird green god on it. Thank you very much. This was America. They say to me, I'm not going to wear that green god. I give it to my cousins, and my cousins would be like, thank you. I'll wear it when nobody's around. Yeah, like that. And I do this all the time. And I make all kinds of things, and amulets and stuff like that. Not amulets that had power, but I wanted to protect people. Another thing is I like memorizing mantras and prayers, because I felt when I grew up, I would travel and teach people. I remember that at a very young age, I would do that naturally. And so this is a little pendant that I found the other day that I made when I was very young. I carried it across the United States. And, there's one of my possessions from small. I just found it by accident. These are all little things. These stupas I used to draw, a little damage. There's a lot of things, some are still in America, some are here. And I didn't have money. I didn't have money at all. And I was very poor, and it was very hard to find images. And I love manjushri. I used to get manjushri and Xerox them in different sizes. This size. It's the same manjushri, different sizes. Sometimes bigger, smaller, bigger ones. Why? I felt if people needed it, I'll have something to give them. So I've been giving away images since I was very young. It's not something new. Since I was a very young child, as long as I remember, I would Xerox all types of things from my own little budget, from little ang paos I received, and give to people. Because in America, at my age 30 years ago, this is all you can get. You didn't get beautiful images like you get this. And I love Buddhas. Seeing that was a dream, forget it. And that was in America. And I used to go to libraries and look for pictures. And I'd Xerox it and make it all different kinds. These are things that are 30 plus years old. Many years ago. So when I couldn't give images, I would give pictures to people. I would do a prayer, and I'd give it to them. I say, take this home and pray, because I can't help you, but Manjushri can. Because I love Manjushri at a very young age. So I do this all the time when I was a kid. See, this is my beautiful Guru Rimchi picture. I used to do Guru Rimchi all the time. I cut them out and give them to people. Avalokiteshvara, you may think, oh my God, how cheap. Yeah, that's all I had. This is from John Blofield, Words of Power. I Xerox these pictures out to cut out to give people. The ink is quite good. This is over 30 years old, in New Jersey. All the time I would do this. I would do millions of mantras. And one of my favorites were the 35 Confessional Buddhas. Like I said, we can get pictures, so I Xerox it out of a book, and I do prayers. All the time. It wasn't like now. Now it's like a smorgasbord. It's like, oh my God, Buddha images everywhere. So when I tell you promote Buddha images, when I say buy them, bring them home, give them to people, please don't think it's for business. Never. I've been doing this my whole life, since I was a very young child, to spread images to beings. It's something that's very strong in me. I don't know why. Very, very strong. Came from nowhere, goes nowhere, and I'm still nowhere. And see, Shakyamuni. I love Shakyamuni. And like I said, I always Xerox different sizes, because I think some people will be traveling, so I want to make sure they get it. Weird little kid, huh? And my stepmother watched me doing this and freak out and beat me up and tell me I was a weirdo. She goes, well, what do you do with all this? Why? And I had pages and pages and pages, stacked away in a little whatever to give people. So when people came to see me, I had something to give them. I don't know, I thought I was some lama, and they come and see a lama, I have to give them something, some weird fantasies I had. And then, I don't know why, but I like this Kuan Yin. I didn't know who really what Kuan Yin was about, but I thought it's nice and compassionate. And look, I'm here in Malaysia now with Chinese people. This is what I had 30 years plus ago. And I put it nicely, and I prayed to Kuan Yin. Many years ago. These are very old. Very, very old. I have a lot of things there. This is my favorite picture, Hiruka. When I was little, I saw him. I freaked out. I said, oh my, Hiruka. So he's fabulous. I said, what a fabulous Buddha. He can have sex and get away with it. Look. That's Hiruka and Vajrayogini in a simplified form. These are very old pictures I've had. Remember, I carry these across America with me. I had one bag full of Dharma pictures and books and pendants and all that stuff, and the other bag was my clothes. And my purpose was to find a mountain or find a cave somewhere to go meditate, go into retreat. That was my purpose, to run away. I did it 3 times. The third time, I ran all the way to Los Angeles. And then I looked for a Dharma center. I joined immediately. That was Geshe-la Center. From Geshe-la, I met Songrimji. From Songrimji, he recognized me. From there, I went to Ganden. It was all on my own. I slept outside. I ate outside, I begged for apples, I begged for food. I slept in paper boxes and plastic bags in highways for the Dharma in America. Why? I'd rather die than live at home and go to college and get married. I told my parents, I'd rather die. They thought I was crazy. But I don't care. And the 8 auspicious signs I used to keep. I don't know why. I thought it was kind of neat. Many years ago. And I draw these pictures over and over. I like Vajrapani. Couldn't find a picture of him anywhere. I liked him. Anyway, I found this in some dictionary or whatever. Encyclopedia. I xeroxed it out and put it in my altar. And let me see. I don't know if I have it here. The Guru tree I found many years ago. This is what I put on my altar because, I couldn't find pictures. So I had this on my altar for a long time, the Guru tree. I thought, you know what? How neat. I can make 3 prostrations and all of them get it, and I get all this merit instead of one God. Isn't that neat? When I was a little kid, I was thinking that, ways to get away with shortcuts and get enlightened. Shortcut. How Paris. Okay. And I have a precious picture of His Holiness Trijanarji, but it's not here. It's in the other box. When I found it when I was very young, I went, oh my God. That's okay. That I kept. Isn't that neat? Wow, this brings back so many memories. I remember drawing it. And I have a lot of these. Can you imagine that? Can you be a little kid drawing this and wearing it, giving it to neighbors, giving it to people, giving it to friends, and they thought I'm weird? Like I told this, I'm not going to wear no green God. I said to God this. They say, well, I don't care. Isn't that fabulous? Look, I'll let you guys pass it around. If it goes missing, you will be searched. Take a look. 30 years plus this one. Isn't that my Shakyamuni nice? Look. I might just lose it. Let's not be smitchy, but let's. Rude. All right. Fat monk, you know what we should do? We should scrape his face, put it in the bottle, and mark it as moisturizer. All right. Does anybody have any specific questions about this book? Raise a hand now or forever hold your peace. Paris, you raised your digits earlier. What?
Oh, it was about
Oh.
why we keep Yidam and protect the practice secret. Why does it take you away from the practice?
You little ignorant fool. Let me tell you all about it. 1 year in the Dharma and you still ask that, embarrass me in front of new outside people and make me lose face. They ain't going to call me His Eminence anymore. They're just going to call me Eminence. And then after that, one more stupid question, they take that away too, and I'll just be Tem Rinpoche. Then I might demote it down to just Tem. Oh. Okay, a new rule, no stupid questions in front of new people who don't know us. But Paris is like, what denotes a stupid question? Anything that comes out of your mouth. Just kidding. All right. All the yidams and deities and practices, either the beings themselves either arise from a person or a being who became fully enlightened, or an emanation, a manifestation, or an incarnation of an enlightened being. Everybody got that straight? Okay. Since these beings arise from the same beings. Example, Lama Tsongkhapa, Yamataka, Kalarupa arises from Manjushri. Since they arise from Manjushri, there is no difference between Manjushri and Yamataka. Who you worship doesn't matter. Example, Heruka is a direct emanation of Buddha Shakyamuni. Direct. So, when we have people who have preconceptions and projections and propriety and culture and so-called morality and ethics, and they're very stuck on this, can't eat pork, can't have sex, you can't talk dirty words, you can't wear red. They have all types of mores and hang-ups and all types of little projections that bind them down even more instead of helping them. See, rules are meant to help us, not bind us down and make us tight and narrow. Some people make the rules and use that as a guideline to become better. Some use it helps them to become narrow and tight. So what happens is that these deities, for example, Yamataka, is the exact same being as Manjushri. Exact. But Manjushri is clothed in a princely form, pleasant, peaceful, smiling, with two arms. He looks like us. He looks normal. Normal. I mean, there are plenty of people out there wearing, raiments, heavenly silks with a sword running around. They're very normal. Anyways, looks, yes, I have it back. Thank you. Don't try to slip in your pocket. I'm watching right here, unless you want to auction for it. Thank you. I need to start a retreat center. I'm going to auction all these off for my retreat center. Now, so when in most places, if you give Manjushri, they're like, oh, wow, because their perception of a Buddha is peace, quiet, happy, gorgeous, elegant, gentle, nice. That's their perception. The minute you show them, Yamantaka, that's Buddha, they go, oh. Well, let me explain why. Well, number one, he has a buffalo head. That's kind of exotic. He doesn't have one arm or two or three or four. He has 34 arms. 34, like that's a little satanic here. And his hands are not just, they're not holding lotuses. They have nails and claws, and they're holding weapons and impale people and knives and forks and, and axes and intestines and skulls and blood. And it's like, ooh. And on top of that, that's just the beginning. And this guy likes to wear jewelry, by the way. He doesn't go to Pokong and buy it. He goes to the cemetery and cuts people's off and wears a rosary of freshly cut head. And by the way, it's not strung by wand, with nylon, strung by intestines. Hello, he wears an intestinal mala with fresh human heads. And that doesn't help either. He's blue and black. He refuses to wear any clothes. Probably can't find any because he's so fat. And and he's stepping on all these people. He's got 9 faces, Yamataka 9, like not one, not two. This guy's greedy, 9. 9 faces. What is coming out with a number like my car plate 9? Ooh. Okay, 9. And each of those faces, trust me, except for one, they're pretty ugly. They're pretty scary. They got fangs. They got 3 eyes, gaping mouths, huge tongues. They're wrinkled in wrath. They're on fire. The eyes are bloodshot. And then the main face is a big water buffalo. It's not a buffalo. It's not a cow. It's a water buffalo. And he snorts flames. And then that, it doesn't end there. So you got violence here. You got graphics here. Then now we got sex. Then I told you, Yamataka won't wear any underwear. He refuses. We tried to get the fruit of the looms on him. He just wouldn't. Biforce, fruit of the loom. He just will not wear any underwear. He refuses. And not only will he not wear underwear, you know how some guys have the morning thing? Well, Yamataka has it all day, 24/7. He walks around with this. Well, what can I say? It's always, like there. And then his body is smeared with human ashes. You bring that to your nice little auntie's house in Penang. Hi, mommy, it's Buddha. Pray. I mean, come on. What nice, self-respecting auntie from Malaysia will look at Yamataka and say, yeah, that's Buddha. Thank you very much. Let's make a temple. You bring that to one of these nice Malay kampongs, you know what? They're going to have you evicted. They're going to have get out demon practitioner. Yamataka is scarier than Satan practitioners in America. He looks scarier than Satan, with the traditional Satan with the horns and the goat feet. Pan. Think about that. Nobody understands the imagery. Nobody understands what he's about. Nobody understands his nakedness, the fire, the gore, the violence. Nobody understands the huge, incredible significance and the transformative powers that he represents, and the graphic ways he represents enlightenment by destruction of ignorance, hatred, and ignorant hatred and desire. Nobody understands that. So when they don't understand that and you bring that in, and you're not at the level to prove your power of Tantra, it creates obstacles for yourself. Why? You can't prove the power of Yamataka because you ain't practiced. And two, before you can prove yourself, you and Yamataka is on your way out. And it creates it creates confusion in people's minds. They don't understand. So the Tantras are very fast and very efficacious because it deals directly with our negative emotions and hence the violence and the gore that they represent. So when people don't understand that, you keep them away. Even in Tibet, the protector and Yidam chapels are kept completely away. You don't put Yamataka and all these wild deities in the main altar. You don't. You have a special chapel. We call them Genkang. That's why I would like our center to get another property, to get another building, to make a chapel, to make a bigger place. We need a Tantra room. We need a Tantra place. It's very important. Why? Many nice Buddhists will come in and say, oh my God, what's that? So that's one reason the physical imagery is quite shocking for people who don't understand. I mean, now, you show Yamataka to Paris, you go, oh, whatever. That's it. I've seen worse in clubs. I mean, what's the big deal? And in fact, in Paris, they say, oh, it's a little too small. Get a better artist. Yeah. So what's my point? But before that, when you looked at Hiruka, oh my God. And then, talk about pure pornography. Pure. Look at Vajrayogini. Oh my goodness. Can you imagine Mrs. Ngao dressed up like that running around for Halloween? Body painted red. Hi, I'm Vajrayogini. Mr. Ngao will think it's fun, but she'll be like, I'm getting out of here. Can you imagine Kendarohi in that outfit? I mean, the absence of an outfit, actually. And then Kendall is walking around, trick or treat. Kind of scary, huh? But if, oh my, did you hear that? Oh, ho, ho, falsetto. So imagine Kendarohi and this, paints himself red, no underwear, nothing, walks around, ties the thing back. He's going to tie it really back. Anyways, he gets... Wasn't that gross? I know I'm on film. I love it. I'm so Joan Rivers. Anyways, he's like this. And he's walking around like, trick or treat. I mean, really. Can you imagine? Can you imagine JT? She goes to Australia, goes to one of those sex shops, buys it, and then she's Yamataka. Hi, I'm Yamataka, trick or treat. Oh. I mean, like, oh my. And then can you imagine Ming? Ming wants to be the Casanova of all the Yidams. She'll be Mr. Hiruka, like, oh, please. Can you imagine Mr. Hiruka? Because Mr. Hiruka's got all these fabulous consorts, more than that, but 4 main ones, and he's always in union, one of them, but his favorite is Vajrayogini, and he also has these beautiful women around him. And he's tall, he's good-looking, he's got a trim body, Hiruka, he's fabulous, he's tanned, he's tall, dark, and good-looking. I mean, basically, Hiruka's like that. The only difference is that he has 10 extra arms, but never mind. We can overlook that, because there's just more things to, help you feel better. Imagine Paris going to bed with Hiruka, how he can really make her feel like a woman. You touch me in all the right places because you're touching me in all the places at the same time. Couldn't you imagine Hiruka in Paris? She was touched in all the right places because he's touching all the places because he's got 12 arms, stupid. So imagine Hiruka is a great lover. He doesn't look like Yamataka, short with a buffalo face. He wants to kiss, an animal. Bestiality here. But Hiruka's fabulous. He's tall, he's good looking, he's really tall, dark, and good looking. Got all these arms, and and he just drops his influence. He does whatever you want, Can you imagine Paris? You'll come back here like, I'll practice the Dharma. She'll be real happy, I tell you, real happy. Couldn't you see Jenny with Hiruka? Jenny will come out of Hiruka's chambers a changed person. There will never be another BF again. Never. For the first time, Millie doesn't have an explanation. She comes out of Hiruka's chambers. She has not one explanation, not one. Can you imagine that? If people know them well, that's it. Imagine that. Yeah. And these I mean Hiruka, he's saying, you know, look about Juni, oh my God, she's stepping on gods. She's wearing gory things. She doesn't wear any clothes. I mean, you know, get a shirt. You know, nothing. And she exposes everything. You know, like, oh my God. It's Tibetan Playboy time. Look, centerfold. And she's red, she's passionate, she's dripping. She's so sexy, she's so incredible. So bring that home. You know, I had a picture of Vajrayogini when I was very young. I found it somewhere. Someone gave it to me. I can't remember. I ran home. My mother said, "What's that?" My stepmother. And I showed it to her. She freaked out. She said, "Oh!" She literally said to me, "I don't think that's a Tibetan Buddha. But Tibetan Buddhas don't look like that." I said, "Yeah, it's a Buddha. See?" Yeah, she didn't allow me to keep it. She told me to get rid of it. She couldn't take Vajrayogini. She could not. She said it's a weird Tibetan god. She could not accept it. So you keep them secret on that basic fundamental level. On a higher level, when you do their practices well, and you keep it well, it's another way for you to cut your ego down and the pride of doing higher practices. You know, people run around saying, my yidam is this, my yidam is that, my practice, my protector is this. It's another ego trip. Why should everybody know who your yidam practice is? Why? It's an ego trip. And on the highest level, if you have a you know, you have a big diamond, you know, 20 carat, the hope diamond or whatever. Oh, don't get that, it's cursed. Anyway, you have a big diamond, and you got in your safe. Are you going to tell people I've got a 20 carat diamond in my safe? You know, 2 to the left, 10 to the right, and 10 to the left. Are you going to tell people that? No, of course not. Because when you get home, you know, hello, safe, no diamond. Why would you tell people that? But if your diamond's converted into money, hard cash, it's invested all over the place, and you know, the bonds or whatever, and there's no way you can get rid of it, then you tell me, hey, I got this much. They can't do anything to you. It's likened to you have attained that deity. Your attainments cannot go backwards. Pride is a very big obstacle to Tantra practice. Pride. Thinking that you're somebody or something, or you're advanced, or you have visions, or you know something, or you're clairvoyant. Pride is a very big obstacle to Tantra practice. So it's kept secret for us to reach a higher level and to respect other people who don't know what their meaning is yet. I mean, don't you love Vajrayogini now? Don't you think she's fabulous? But the first time you saw her, it's nifty, but it's weird. I mean, it's not bad, but you're like, ooh, what is it? I mean, you don't come from some kind of weird Hindu society like her, right? Where all these deities are naked. You know, in fact, in India, if the deities have clothes, it's like, you know, what's up? Everybody's naked. So when they don't understand, that's it. So it's out of respect for people. And in Tibet, when Yamataka's lineage first came, do you know for 300 to 400 years, Yamataka was known as a demon, as a spirit, as an evil practice with no lineage. Yamataka was not accepted by all the forms of Tibetan Buddhism and was put down for 300 to 400 years until Lama Tsongkhapa showed up. They say he has no proper lineage. There is no such thing as a buffalo-headed god. His practice has no power. It's made up. It's just trying to compete with the rest of the practices in Yidams. I mean, all wrong views. But Yamataka was not accepted as a Buddha. Was not accepted for 300-400 years. Example, the protector of Dharma protector of the Drigung lineage, Lhamo Apchi, white pendant Lhamo. She was not accepted. My guru told me, Drigung Rimchi, who's Kagyupa, told me she was not accepted in the Kagyupa tradition for hundreds of years. She was considered a demon, a worldly god. Yamataka also. Why? These beings are very beneficial. Listen carefully. These beings are very beneficial to others. Therefore, for them to establish within the hearts and minds of people, it takes more time because their benefit is much, much more. Much, much more. So Yamataka was not established as a real living Yidam, you know, like a real Buddha, hundreds of years. He was brought to Tibet by Ra Lotsawa, who single-handedly practiced it. And by the way, when Ra Lotsawa practiced Yamataka the first time, he had huge people in his towns and cities and villages against him, protests. They wrote letters, they stormed in, they made fun of his son. And they even sent black magic to him, trying to kill him and destroy his temple to Yamataka. They would not accept it. They said that Yamataka is a demon. And the highest people at that time, the officials, all condemned Yamataka and put Yamataka down and said he is not an original Buddhist practice. That's how it was. So all these deities took time to establish themselves. Why? They proved their authenticity by the practitioners themselves. If the practitioners themselves are gentle and kind and forgiving and loving and humble, it proves the practice is good. If the practitioners themselves are stingy, are miserly, are hard, are unforgiving, then whatever you promote, people are not going to believe it's good. You look at yourselves. You see, people can't see the deities. They can see you and how the deities affect you. So if you yourselves have a big mouth and you lie and you cheat and you promote the protectors, you promote the yidams, no one's going to believe you. Why? How can you pray to that and be like you? So how do you promote the Dharma protectors? How do you promote the yidams? How do you promote the practices? By you yourself transforming. If you yourself don't transform, what can you promote? Why? People will look at you. That's all they can do. And no matter how eloquently you speak about the deities, how well you know about the deities, how well you can talk and convincingly say to the deities, ultimately they will not practice. I'll tell you why. They will watch you and how you act. So Dharma will go up from you. Dharma is spread by disciples, not Buddha. Think about that. So if you're stingy and miserly, don't talk about generosity. Don't think that your center will grow. Don't think that things will grow. If you're stingy and miserly, why? Why wait for other people to set the example? You set the example. If you're angersome and fierce and you always have a black face and you won't forgive, don't expect other people to forgive and be nice. Don't talk about Kuan Yin and Chen Izik. Don't recite Om Mani Padme Hum. Because why? Bad advertisement. Bad. You know, if Toyotas always have accidents and, people are always getting killed by Toyotas and stuff on the highway, then if you advertise Toyota, who's going to buy it? Who's going to buy it? Defective and malfunctioning. If you yourself don't have Guru devotion, and you yourself always have negative thoughts about other people, about your Dharma brothers and sisters, always criticizing, very hard and very narrow, if you yourself are like that, then what Dharma is going to grow in you? Or wherever you are, the Dharma cannot grow. Whoever you speak to and touch, Dharma cannot grow. Cannot. Impossible. So you, me, us, we need to be generous. We need to let go. We need to be kind. We need to be honest and not cheat. We need to have Guru devotion. We need to have Guru Samaya. We need to be humble. We need to control our body, speech, and our mouths. We need to. We need to have a white smiling face, not a black face, and try to teach Dharma to people. We need to. And then we'll spread the Dharma to others. It starts with me. And the more knowledge we have, the more evil we act, the more bad we act, the more we put the Dharma down. Well, the more you can speak about the Dharma, the more people will disrespect the Dharma. Why? If you know so much, you're still like that? If you've been in Dharma for 1 or 2 years and you still talk about magic and divinations and miracles and visions and dreams, that's all you talk about. You bring the Dharma down because that's not what the Buddha talked about. No. You go to any high lama in Ganden and you talk about your visions, dreams. They say, yeah. They show you the door immediately. Immediately they show you the door. If you talk about it too much, you will be disciplined. Because we had one monk running around telling people he saw Tara. People could not stop laughing till they cried. The high lamas had compassion for him. The high lamas advised him, don't talk like that. Because I was there, my guru was there. My guru says, maybe you see Tara, I don't. But we can't check. Please don't talk about that in the great University of Ganden. Please don't talk about you see Tara. Please don't talk. Don't say that to people, please. He even wrote books that he sees Tara and tells people I see Tara. He gave me a book. He wrote about how he saw Tara and all that stuff. And my guru compassionately told him, don't do that. Don't say like that. In a great, he said, why not? My guru says, because the great lamas like Trujana Rinpoche and Sawara Rinpoche are in the monasteries. And they don't talk about seeing that, and you talk about it. It's very disrespectful. How can you have higher attainments than them? Similarly, you have a great master in the city, you have a great lama in the city, then you run around telling people you have this vision, you have this, you have that, then that means you're better than the lama. You're better than lama. Then why do you need to go for Dharma talk? Then you're already highly attained. Oh, you cannot. Very bad. All these things that I explained to you come from Ganden. The rules come from Ganden. It's very, very significant. Very significant. Humility, humbleness, honesty, no manipulativeness, straightforwardness, not cheating emotionally and financially, and being very, very true is the crust of Dharma practice. And then when you have those qualities, you develop those, you meet a lama who gives you the golden nectar of the Dharma and teaches you the preliminary practices. You engage in that combined with Lamrim. And you don't fight with your guru and protest and make problems and difficulties or cheat or lie or use your guru. You actually go for Dharma, make offerings and help your guru. Then you will see your attainments grow. Then when you are ready, your guru will initiate you into the highest yoga tantras, which will purify your negative karmas like that. Just like that. Even the most evil crime. What are the 5 heinous crimes? Sing Piao, name one. Fat Monk, name another. Say it in Chinese. Joseph. What did he say, Joseph? David, another one. Chia, another one. That's right. If we commit any of the 5 heinous crimes, there is no bardo. The minute you close your eyes, you open it, you're in one of the lower naraks, or one of the hells. Immediately. Unending hells. The purification practice, such as the 35 confessionals and vajrasattwas, cannot repair the damage. You will go there. The only practice that can purify that in one lifetime is the tantras. Example, Yamantaka is the only tantra that has the capability to purify your negative karma that is so severe in one lifetime. Now let me explain something to you, wonderful people, which you need to know. The difference between, listen carefully, and this is very instrumental. See, we're not going to talk too much about the book. The book is self-explanatory. I don't need to explain the actions of a holy lama, such as Chögyam Trungpa, which I respect tremendously. His actions speak for himself. If you have negative view, that's you. If you have positive view, that's you. Now, the difference between negative karma if we experience it and negative karma if we purify it. Now we're going to talk about the difference between negative karma if we experience the negative karma and it goes away and purified, or experience it by purification. There's a difference. Now listen carefully. When Lama Tsongkhapa did many meditations, Manjushri spoke to Lama Umapa, the great Nyingma Lama Umapa, and told his disciple Tsongkhapa, because one of Tsongkhapa's gurus was the Nyingma Lama Umapa, that you're doing too much meditation. Meditation is very good, but you're doing too much. You cannot gain realization by meditation alone. This is Manjushri telling Lama Tsongkhapa, right? Imagine us. The list is going to be a little longer. You cannot attain your goals by meditation alone. Why? Meditation does collect positive merits. It does purify negative karma, but it doesn't purify all of your negative karma at the rate that is necessary to become enlightened. You need to engage in purification practices. So lessen your meditations and increase your purification practices. That was Manjushri's advice to Lama Tsongkhapa. You can read that. The source is Hiruka Vajrasattva by Lama Yeshe. Wisdom Archives. All right? So therefore, Lama Tsongkhapa lessened his meditation. And went into purification practice. He went with 8 disciples into a cave called Oka, which is in Lhasa now. It is a pilgrimage site. You can go to Lhasa now and you can see this cave. And he went in there for a 5-year retreat. And he did 3.5 million prostrations. There's a 35 confessional Buddhas. He did 100,000 prostration to each of the 35 confessional Buddhas. The norm is, listen carefully, the 35 confessional Buddhas, you do 100,000 prostrations to all of them. It takes you a few months, you finish. Maybe 6-7 months, you finish. Lama Tsongkhapa pushed it a little further. He didn't do 100,000 to 35. He did 100,000 to each of them, equaling to 3.5 million prostrations to purify his negative karma. At the conclusion of him doing that retreat, he had a vision of Manjushri directly. Which Manjushri told him, your negative karma is purified. Your last obscuration purified, you can see me now. You do not need to go through Lama Umapa. You know, Lama Tsongkhapa was so humble. He said to Lama Manjushri, no, you're a vision, you're a mirage, you're an evil spirit. No. You know that from the Lamrim, right? Yes, Joanne knows that. He said, no. Imagine these days if we have a dream, Manjushri tell everybody, Manjushri spoke to me, and guess what's the message to you and the whole planet? I am enlightened, I am a Lama. People these days, they even have a teeny little dream of Manjushri to tell everybody they show off, Manjushri, me, I'm special. Oh, BS. Real Dharma practitioners such as Lama Tsongkhapa had a vision of Manjushri immediately. And you know what? He told Manjushri, you're not Manjushri. You're a vision. Go away. Shh, food. The rituals get him away. Manjushri says, no, I am Manjushri. Yeah, I am Manjushri. Hello. Sword, lotus, hand, gold. Hello, I'm Manjushri. Go away. He would not believe. And Manjushri kept manifesting to him again and again and again. And Lama Tsongkhapa would not accept it. You know what Lama Tsongkhapa says? Someone of my level cannot have visions of someone so high. I am not at that level yet. You cannot be Manjushri. I am sorry. Yeah, that's Manjushri. That's Lama Tsongkhapa's humility. These days, I tell you, people never mind even have a little dream. They advertise everywhere with big mouths and showing off, sitting on thrones and telling everybody there's something special, which actually they're leading themselves and other people to hell. Hell. Nowhere but hell. So finally, you know how Lama Tsongkhapa was convinced it was Manjushri? He went back to Lama Umapa. Manjushri told Lama, can you tell him I'm Manjushri, please? I swear to God. So Manjushri told Lama Umapa to tell him that it's Manjushri. So when Lama Tsongkhapa's Lama told him it is Manjushri, then he believed it. Then Lama Umapa says, from now on, in regards to talking to Manjushri directly, you do not need to contact me anymore. This being that appears to you is Manjushri. So only when the Lama told him he is, his Guru devotion was so strong, then he believed it. He believed this Lama, not Manjushri. And that's real practice. That's humility. These days, the Lama tells you don't have visions, slap him. Avoid his teachings. Don't talk to him. Kill him. Gossip about him. Get him back. Noose him. These days you tell disciples, you're not seeing any visions. It's not real. They immediately show you a noose. What did you say? Oh, yeah, it's real. Oh, yeah. It's so fake. It is so fake. The amount of people I hear, say they have visions, they do divinations, they have people telling them voices. It is so fake. Anybody, okay, I'll be very clear. Anybody in this room has no visions. I guarantee you. If anyone in this room says they have visions, come talk to me. I will test you out. No one in this room has any visions. No one in this room is qualified to do divination. No one in this room hears voices unless you need medication. No one in this room has any level of attainments. No one in this room. This one I guarantee you. And if you're going to ask me logically how to prove it, I will prove it to you according to the texts. I will prove it to you. According to the vows, according to the bodhisattva stages, I will prove to you. So if anybody in this room says that they have any powers or visions, they hear things, they are lying, they're tricking you, they're trying to get money. But if they say they see evil spirits, believe them. Why? They have negative karma. If they can see evil spirits, if they can see spirits, no heads, they disturb you, actually stay away from those people. Why? Because they see it, they hang around you, those things must be hanging around you too. Yeah, think about it. So imagine Kandaron comes, you know what? He tells Andy, he was trying to pick Andy up actually. But anyways, it didn't work because Andy, okay, let's not go too deep. Anyways, he was trying to pick up Andy. He says, you know what? I can see ghosts and spirits with no eyes and stuff. Andy says, really? Now Andy comes, he knows better. And if Andy doesn't know better, he goes to Kandaron and says, wow, and scatters flowers and Kandaron and says, you're fabuli. But if Andy's smart, he'll say, it was great knowing you. My vows are not that strong. My refuge is not that fabulous. See you later, alligator. Because if these things are following Kandarohi and you're near Kandarohi, they might follow you back home because they find you a better friend. So you don't want to go home, and then when you turn off the lights, guess what? Kandarohi's friends are there visiting you. And they're not exactly that nice. So if you hang around people that tell you they see spirits and ghosts and hantus and they're helping them, they're talking to them, they're benefiting them, they're either lying, and if they're not, run away. Or go to DMT, KMT, KP, and buy 20 chakras and wear it. They will follow you home. And if your luck is down, you're hanging around these people, those things will follow you. It's not a joke. So if they run around telling you they see spirits and stuff like that, there are people who can see it, so what? So they can see spirits. What's the big freaking deal? They got 3 eyes, I got 4. What's the big deal? So they can see spirits. If they tell you they see spirits, run. Run. It's dangerous. Either they dabble in spirits, or they've been charmed, or they went somewhere, they follow them, or they're doing something not good. Because if they have refuge, they can control the spirits and help. And if they say they can control the spirits, you can test them. How do you control it? And if you can't test them, bring them to me. No one in this room can have visions. No one in this room can see things or hear things. No one in this room can talk to protectors or idams or daisies. No one. Anyone in this room, outside of this room, I don't know, because maybe my neighbors is a medium, I don't know. They say that they're lying. I guarantee you. And no one in this room can use that to talk about Dharma to other, or they're outright lying. Very simple. Because I have ways to check. If people in this room practice love and humility and compassion, they're your friends. If they talk about forgiving and letting go and they're honest and they're direct, they're your friends. If they do Lama Tsongkhapa's Guru Yoga and they're humble, they're quiet, they do the preliminary practices, they're your friends. If they encourage you to go to Dharma teachings and Dharma talks, they're your real Dharma friends. If they tell you to hold your vows and don't break refuge, go on pilgrimage, they're your real friends. If they tell you to respect the high lamas like His Holiness Dalai Lama and help Ganden, they're your friends. Those are your friends. Anything else, they're not your friends. No, definitely not. So there's ways to check. No one. No one. And if anybody in this room can do divination, let's have a divination contest. Come. Come. And let me ask you a few questions, and you ask me a few questions. I've got webcams everywhere. I know everything. I carry webcams in my armpit. So when I watch you, I'm watching you. No one in this room can do divinations, and anybody has the audacity to pretend they are, the karma is very heavy. Why? You actually commit the negative karma of not being able to practice a tantra in the future. No tantra for you. Pretending to have miraculous powers when you don't. It breaks down the principal bodhicitta vows. Right? Oh yes. No one. You don't hear Tenma run around, I see this, I see that, because I don't. I don't. And if I do, I won't tell you, because if Tenma sees spirits, then how? Finished what? Tenma don't see deities, Tenma don't see idams, nothing. He doesn't see idams and Avalokiteshvara, he doesn't see deities, but he does see his lamas very kind. He does see kind people, and he does see himself changing and transforming, becoming a better person. And that's fabulous. That's the real idam and deity. Don't bring ghosts and all that crap. People tell you they see ghosts, they see this. They are lying. They're trying to get your money. They're trying to sleep with you. They're trying to get your respect. They want something from you. There's a motive. There's always a motive. Because highly realized practitioners don't run around, oh, I see this, I see that, I see that, you see this. Ugh. Any high lama you go to in the Tibetan tradition, a real high one, you tell them that, they will not be pleased. I promise you, they will not be pleased. Re mare. You ask him, he's Tibetan, he knows. None of them. So no such thing. In Malaysia, I'm going to spread real Buddhism. I'm going to give you real Tibetan Buddhism, authentic, real with a lineage. I'm not going to go for all this silly wung wung ging guang guang, all that stuff. I'm not into it. I carry a Vajra bell, and guess what? I'm Muki Buka, and my special lineage comes from the sky. And I just went swimming with Vajrayogini, and therefore I'm going to give you initiation Muka, and take pictures of me and give everybody and I paint myself purple. Oh no, I hate all that. Why? Because I've been to hell, it ain't fun. It ain't fun at all, let me tell you. We've all been there, let's not go back. You go back there, you're going to find David Lai. What's the point? There's 18 levels. You go down to the next level, oh my God, there's Kanda Rohi. Dancing amid the flames, and it isn't Vajrayogini, trust me. And then you go to the 17th level, Hai Ming. Horrible, isn't it? And then you go up to the 16th level, hi JJ. You go to the 15th level, there's Cha. You know what Cha's doing? He fell asleep. So he burned himself. But then again, you burn yourself anyway, whether you fall asleep or not. Can you believe that? Oh yes, it's not a pretty sight. And it exists. The difference is, when you practice Dharma, more difficulties seemingly arise. Do you know why? Because the Dharma practices make all your karma arise to purify. But at the same time, you're given protection, such as the Dharma protectors, to guide you through until it's purified. So some people say, oh, when I practice Dharma, more negative things happen. No, it's their imagination. It's not more negative things happen. You know what's happening? You know what's happening is purification is happening. Purification. Example, if you have a disease, you don't go to the doctors to go for treatment. You won't have much pain, just the pain of disease. But if you go for treatment, you have the pain of the disease and the treatment, double. So you're saying, it's so painful, right? What are you going to do, slap the doctor? No, you can't. So if the Lama gives you practices and you're experiencing more difficulties at that time, you don't go there and slap Tenma Rinpoche. No, you don't. You give him money. You give him ang paos. You give him praise. You give him diamonds. Diamonds are Rimchi's best friend. Don't forget that. Anyways, remember that. You're going for purification. It's like when you go for a doctor, he's treating you for something. You got more pain. I'm so sorry. If you have cancer, you go for chemotherapy. I'm sorry to use this. It's double the pain. It's a cancer and chemo. So what do? Slap the doctor? No. Same for Dharma. All the crap is coming out. So if you don't do purification practices, Lama Tsongkhapa did purification practice, and his result was direct vision of Manjushri. After that, he can talk to Manjushri directly and compose text. In fact, some of the texts he composed were directly from Manjushri. Directly. And by the way, let me tell you something. He didn't say this. This was written by his disciple Ketru Rinpoche when he passed away, because Lama Tsongkhapa would not allow anyone to talk about his visions and what he saw and what he experienced, because he was very humble. He told his disciples, never talk. When he passed away into parinirvana, he achieved rainbow body in Bardo. Then Ketru Rinpoche wrote a biography called Sangwe Namtar. Sangwe Namtar is secret biography of Je Lama. And that talked about his visions and what went on. It wasn't Lama Tsongkhapa who talked about himself. It was the disciples who was overwhelmed by the power of their Lama. And they talked about his secret visions. It was not him. Unlike today, we publish books about our secret visions. There's a secret in my foot. There's secrets our anus. That's pretty secret too, isn't it? Nobody sees it, so it's secret what? What are you looking at me like that for? I'm not going to tell people you wear bikinis and walk up and down Jalan Alor. I promise. We talked about that. I said I wouldn't, remember? And I won't tell them that it's fire red. And then I won't tell you that last week you forgot to shave your bikini line. We talked about that I won't talk. See, I won't talk. I keep my promise. See, cross my heart and hope to die. Again, I was like, oh, I hate him. Can't we just have a Dharma talk without me being involved? Please, thank you very much. That's what Kendall is thinking. Can. Mr. Ngao loves this. He's like, this is the best entertainment I had in years. This is better than Star TV. Mr. Ngao's going to go home and cut out Astro. Don't need it anymore. He's going to subscribe to Tem Astro. Yeah, what Astro for what? Bar Ring, everybody who, he's going to subscribe to me. Fabulous. So what happens is this. Well, Mr. Ngao likes Dharma teachings. He's thirsty for it. That's why he enjoys it. Wendy and Baldy here and a couple other, I don't know, all you funny people that comes from the zoo. No, Mrs. Ngao, you're not from the zoo. No, you're a nice person. You're the zookeeper. Never mind. And she's like, that's not so bad. At least I'm a human being. Yeah. You're a zookeeper in Russia, all right? Russia, there's no food for the animals. They eat you. Anyways, now, when you experience bad karma and it comes, listen carefully. When you experience bad karma, it comes, yes. That experience purifies that negative karma. And you don't have to experience that karma again. But because you're experiencing it not because you're in control or a cheat or you're advanced and you can take it, you're experiencing out of no control because you're stuck in samsara and it's a result of your negative karma. Then when those negative karmas manifest and you purify, inverted commas, you actually don't. You know why? Because of your anger, your habituation, your desire, your hatred, all the negative karma that's backing you up, you react to that karma, purifying negatively. Someone steals your car, you're not going to sit there and say, oh, it's my karma. You're going to freak out. Someone bangs your car, you're going to freak out. If you lose your money, you're going to freak out. If someone shouts at you, you're going to freak out. If someone confronts your negative qualities, you're going to freak out. If someone confronts your negative qualities, or you've been caught for your negative quality, you won't think, I purified my karma. You're going to be very angry. You're going to get them back. Why? Because you're habituated that way. So people who don't do spiritual practices to purify their negative karma, and they just leave it, and let it manifest on their own. They say, well, I'm purifying because it's coming out and it's okay. It's not. You know why? You have subtle negative grasping and you have gross negative grasping. The gross negative grasping will manifest anger, hatred, and desire towards the negative things happening. If your relationship breaks, how many of us sit there when our relationship breaks and we can take it, we're happy, we're all right? No, we go into depression, we're very angry, we react back negatively, we're jumpy, we're bitchy, we're difficult, we may not eat, we may not, whatever. How do we act? And then they try to glorify that. Well, as a partner, as a friend, I'm going through this, I'm taking a while. There's no glorification of anything in samsara. None. It's bullshit. Why? What glory is there in suffering? What glory is there? So when people break up from relations, how do they act? How do they react? Some people go for revenge. Some people go kill. Ever hear about Bobbitt? Yeah. Remember what she did to Bobbitt? Yeah, some of you know, some of you. And those who don't know, you can talk to Paris and Kendra over here sniggering away in the corner because you know what? They're evil and they know about these things. I didn't. I was like putting newspaper for my doggy to pee out and I accidentally came across it. I wasn't interested at all. I didn't go there and buy it and read it up. No, voraciously. No, not at all. I'm pure. Paul's like, Boobit? Who's Boobit? And Charles already translated into Lubit? Who's Lubit? So, people get revenge. They get angry. Give me money. Alimony. The kids, the dogs, they fight. And that's not purification. Do you know why? Purification is when you take it well and it's really purified. So people who go through life and negative actions manifest and they go through it. Okay, when they go through it, that's not purification. That is without control, you have to experience the result of your negative karma. And then most of us, 99.9%, including me, we react back negatively, creating even more negative karma and more negative karma and more negative karma and more. So actually, it gives us an illusion we're purifying by experiencing, but actually we're getting more. Example, let me give you a very clear example. If you've been sleeping around and cheating on your partner, and you've been hurting your partner, you will take rebirth as an animal. That is clear in the Lamrim. So when you take rebirth as an animal, for someone who don't think any deeper, they say, that's well, I guess, all right, you purify your karma. But if you take rebirth as a snake, because you've been an evil cheater, you've been a bad cheater with anger, and you're very good at lying, you take rebirth as a snake, full of hatred and anger. So your whole life as a snake for the next 5, 6, 7 years is lived killing and eating and stalking and hurting. So you may be purifying the karma of becoming a snake, but collecting even more karma of going deeper into samsara. That's not purification. Do you guys understand that example? Yeah. So if you cheat people and you steal, and you got away with it, and you got a lot of money. See, when you cheat people and you steal, you get a lot of money. You can spend, you can buy things for your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your mother, your daughter, your sister, your husband, your wife, whatever. And you just, you're throwing it away. You're on top of KLCC, you're throwing the money, man. And you cheat people and you get the money, you can spend it. Yeah, you got that couple of million, you got that couple of $100,000, a couple of dollars, $10, 20, whatever you're cheating people for. Enjoy it. Do you know why? The money you get will create even more negative karma in you. Not to enjoy it, to have fear, to create the causes for you to lose more and more and more. That in the future, if you're supposed to get money or business, something good, you will not get it. And your life will go down, 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 down. And even when you, let's say that, your great-grandmother from, Nepal passes away and leaves you 5 billion, US dollars. Because you don't have the karma to get it, because you've been cheating and lying all the way. Even when you get the money, you can't use it. And if you use it, you know what happens to the money? It will twist and turn you into alcoholism, women, spendthrift, losing bad investments, you'll lose it all. The karma will come back that way. So if you cheat for the money, you have it, have a good time. You will never be able to keep it. If you trick people in business for money, if you trick people, enjoy it. The people who are tricked will pray for you. They're good people. That's what Lateran Jews teach us. Will pray for you, you may enjoy it and have no attachments, and you teach them how to let go. But for you, you will never be able to get that money again. You will keep losing it and losing it. And no matter how much you get, it will just keep going away. Why? Unless the Buddha is lying about karma. Read the Lamrim. Lamrim is not made up by some weird Tibetan Lama. It is made up by Lama Atisha himself, who sent that back to Nalanda Monastery as a gift because he could not return back. The great Indian master, Kadamba Master Atisha. All Lamrim is based on that. Condensed path of Buddha's teachings. So when you cheat people and you make up great lies and you make up whatever and you get away with it, you got away with it. Yeah, you got away with those stupid people and they can't ever get their money back or they can't get their house back or their car, whatever you cheat them. No problem, you won. But be ready. And the type of people you cheat, the level of their attainments. If it's your father and mother or someone who really needs the money or someone who really was desperate or someone that was hard-earned or it was a high realized spiritual being, or is a very sincere old lady who saved her money her whole life, and you cheated her. Depending on the person you cheat, the karma is even heavier. Much heavier. Example, if you kill a monk or you kill an ordinary man, of course a monk is worse. Oh yes, of course. I've seen people come into monasteries and try to cheat Khensa Rinpoche. I've seen it. They come, they say on some business, they need help, give a loan, and Rinpoche gives it them, he loses money. Rinpoche says, never mind, it's okay. Always says to me, never mind, it's okay. I've seen him all the time. These villagers come and they trick him. They think they trick him, actually. But my point is this, is that usually a bodhisattva will not refuse anyone, even if they're being tricked, a real bodhisattva. And they react, and then when they've been tricked, they react differently. You know how they react? With forgiveness. Why? They've hooked you together with them for the next lives to help you when you come out of hell. No joke. A bodhisattva thinks like this. They'll let you do something bad, good with them. If they can't do something good, they'll let you do something bad with them. If they can't, why? It's better than nothing at all. They make a connection for you in the future life when you come out of hell. Literally, no joke, when you come out of hell. So a bodhisattva will allow things to happen. Why? If they don't, they will look into the future and know that nothing else and no one else can help you for a long, long time. So they will sacrifice that. So to them, when they're cheated or something is taken away from them, they consider it an offering towards your liberation. Literally, it's like that. Literally. So people will take advantage of advanced beings and holy beings. The holy beings know it. They give it to you. They give you what you want. They let you have what you want. But it is their offering to you for your liberation. But it's your negative karma at the same time. So when we cheat, when we lie, and then when we make promises, promises are horrible. Promises when we break, especially to our lamas, to monks, the sangha, and we don't keep our promises, or we break our promises, we don't go and make up for it, and we just say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry doesn't make up for it. And we don't do that. We can never gain attainments. The roots of attainments is our samaya. We will never gain attainments. Never. Impossible. So, when we experience negative karma as a result of negative karma, when we experience negative situations as a result of negative situation, we usually react negatively. Someone takes our car away, someone takes our phone away, someone takes our lover away, someone takes our wife away, someone takes away our money. How do we react? We get depressed, we get unhappy, we get angry, we look for a way out. How do we react? So, yeah, your karma has been purified for that action, but because of your negativity and habituations, you create even more to get more. Understand that? Now, if you realize you have negative karma, and all of us do, if Lama Tsongkhapa had negative karma, trust me, my friends, you and I are soaked in it, through and through. It's like Willy Wonka in the chocolate factory, and we've soaked Khanda Rohi in there. Let me tell you, he is a chocolate bunny, chocolate goat. Yes. Think about that. So when you actually do purification practice such as Samaya Vajra, prostrations, Vajrasattva meditation with sadhana. If you do practices such as making circumambulation, if you do purification practices, this is the difference, okay? When you purify your karma by purification practices, you purify that action and you don't create further ones. Why? You are directly purifying the action. Therefore, you do not create further negative action. Therefore, the action that you have created is purified. You don't create more. And some more, listen to the catch here, you gain merit. So for those of us who ignorantly think, oh, we don't need to do any purification practices, and they don't do any. They don't do any at all. No prostrations, no Vajrasattva, no 35 confessional Buddhas. They don't do the Samaya Vajra to repair the Samaya with their gurus. They don't do anything, and they break their commitments again and again and again. These people will not be successful in business. Even if their gurus tell them they'll be successful in business, successful in life, successful, they cannot be. Why? You being told you can be successful means if you fulfill these conditions, you'll be successful. If you don't fulfill these conditions, you don't do it and then say, I will be successful. Why? Create the causes to be successful. If you don't create the causes to be successful and you blatantly throw your guru's advice aside, thinking you know better, you will not be successful. How can you know better than your guru? How can you know better than your Dharma protector? Impossible. So when you do purification practices, the difficulty in prostrations is difficult, but it's better you suffer prostrations to purify your body than to be sick in a hospital, which costs you money, you're sick, and you're angry. Whereas if you purify your negativities through your body, and it's painful to do prostrations, it's painful, it's hard. But you purify the negative karma immediately, and you collect merit because you're not prostrating to a wall, you're prostrating to a Buddha. So I'd rather purify my negativity of my body with prostrations than hang out in the hospital. So some people say that, oh, never mind, when bad things happen, they joke about it. Oh, I purify my karma. No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't. So I listen to all this crap. I listen to all these people talking like that. I listen. I said, no. They don't know what they're talking about. They never studied. They never learned. They never meditated. They don't know anything. They talk out of ignorance. You do not purify your karma by experiencing it. You don't use the word purification. You experience your negative karma when it arises, and you collect more negative karma because of your habituation and reacting towards it. And at the same time, when you do purification practices consciously, retreats or whatnot, during retreats, listen carefully. During retreats, your Lama will scold you. During retreats, your Lama will tell you off. The Lama will make you start over. The Lama will make all kinds of rules for you. Do you know why? To utilize your retreat so that you get the maximum benefit to purify. An example. When you're at your home, your trainer says, hey, you got to run today. Yeah, you kiss my butt. I'm not going to go running, right? But when you're at the gym, your trainer really pushes you. Your trainer lights a torch under your butt so you run, and faster. And someone, when you're on that treadmill, they make it faster. You at home, you run 6. At the gym, they put 15. You're like, thank you very much. So like that. When your Lama puts you in retreat, if you're lucky enough to be in retreat, if you're lucky enough that when the Lama tells you and you do it, everything ugly and nasty will happen in your retreat. You'll have nasty dreams. You'll have nasty experiences. Your Lama will be very fierce and ugly and mean to you. Do you know why? Because a retreat means retreat from your own negative mind. That's what a retreat is. To give your negative mind a break and to stop thinking negatively. So when the Lama treats you, inverted commas, badly during retreat, and you fight back, and you run away, and you resist, it shows you what kind of stupid person you are. Why? Why are you stupid? Even for the Dharma, when the Lama teaches you and shows you, you fight back. Even for the Dharma, you fight back. Even for the Dharma, you think you know more. Even for the Dharma, you resist and you challenge. Even for the Dharma. And then you fight back and you protest and say, why? Why like that? Why like that? Why like that? Why don't you let it all go and trust the Lama? Oh, there are many people like that. So when you purify your negative karma by direct purification practices, you purify the negative karma and you will not experience it again. And you gain attainments and you collect merit. So when you collect that merit in retreat during purification, do you know what happens? Your understanding of Dharma will grow. Your diseases will lighten or cure. Your narrowness of the mind will open up. Your depth of realization will be born. Your stability of mind will be firm. And, listen to this, the more retreats you do, the less and less and less lonely and scared you will feel. Do you know why? The very causes for you to feel that will be removed by the purification of your negative karma. Oh, yes. So when people say, oh, I don't want to do this because I'm not feeling well, I have this problem, that problem, the very fact that they're not feeling well, they should do it. Oh, yes. Why? You're removing the causes directly. And what's retreat? Retreats intensified practice to purify a certain negative karma. So when people don't do their practice, they don't do retreats, they don't keep their samayas, you think, well, everybody else is not. Yeah, everybody else is not. But everybody else is not trying to be a Buddha. Everybody else is just trying to make money. And why would you want to come to Dharma? Ask people how to make money. Divination, how to make money. Dharma doesn't make you money. Dharma gives you Buddhahood. You want to make money? You already know how to make money before you came to Dharma. You don't need to ask your Lama how to make money. You ever hear of, in how to get rich in one Dharma session, teachings by any Lamas? Dalai Lama's 10-step way to become rich. Dalai Lama's version of becoming a millionaire. Why would you go to your Lamas how to be rich and disturb him and all that stuff? Why? Why? Why would you ask your Lamas about love and relationships and all this crap? You want to sleep with 100 people, you get in trouble? That's your problem. You don't want to do your commitments, you don't do your practice, you don't want to work hard and you're lazy and you have bad things happen to you and you go disturb your Lama with that. Why? What you want from your Lama is Buddhahood. You're not trying to get a car, money, or sex, or fun, or whatever. No, you want Buddhahood. So when you do purification practices, you purify the karma directly, with intent, and you collect positive merit, and you will gain attainments, understanding, your mind will become firm and solid. The good qualities in your mind, such as compassion and forgiveness, will naturally arise. The obstacles for them to be chained down will be gone. Think about that. Whereas if you don't do it and you just sit there and say, well, bad things happen, I'm purified, you're not purified. Well, how do you react to bad things? Even when, you know what, listen to this. Let me tell you something very scary, all right? It's scary because it's the truth and we don't know about it. Some people say, I don't drink, I don't sleep around, and I don't kill, and I don't, eat meat, and, I don't lie. I don't do these things, and I'm a good person. To anybody just watching them, yes, you're a good person. To people with higher knowledge, you're not. Do you know why? Even doing nothing but sitting there within the mind frame of self-grasping collects negative karma on a very subtle level. So if you don't kill, you don't lie, you don't steal, and you just hang around at home watching TV, you still collect negative karma on the ultimate level, on the self-grasping level. Why? You're not existing out of enlightenment. You're existing out of self-grasping mind. Me, 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 me. So even existing is collecting negative karma. If you really understand the workings of karma, even existing. So some of us have a lot of pride and ego telling people that are stupid, who don't know, oh, I'm a good person. I don't do this, I don't do that. You can stop saying that from now on. If you're a good person, you wouldn't be in samsara. If you're a good person, you wouldn't be controlled by your negative karma. If you're a good person, you wouldn't be afraid of death in your next life. You would have control of it. I'll tell you who a good person is. Buddha Tsongkhapa. That's a good person. Yeah, you want to hear another good person? Buddha and Tsongkhapa, Nagarjuna, and Dalai Lama, Mother Teresa. Those are good persons. We are not good persons. We are lazy, selfish people who don't want to do anything, sit at home and say, I'm a good person, I don't do anything. Wow. No, we're not good people. We're very selfish, innately self-grasping people. So sitting there doing absolutely nothing collects negative karma. Do you know why? Because you're not existing out of enlightenment. You're not an emanation of a Buddha, sorry to tell you. Ming thinks she's Black Zambala. If she's Black Zambala, I'm Lama Tsongkhapa. Anyways, what's my point? All of us, me included, even doing nothing at home, collect subtle negative karma because it reinforces a self-grasping mind. That's why Buddha says the minute you get your body, suffering begins. It's not negative. It's to make you realize, buck up, do something, push yourself. Don't be under the sway of ignorance thinking that you're not doing anything bad. You are. Some people in this room, the teachings go directly into their minds. Some people cannot. Some people will understand these teachings on a very high level. Some people in this room will understand on a medium scope. Some people will not understand it at all. And I'll tell you why. The amount of purification practices they have done. And the few people who understand the teachings, they will not be able to put it into practice or make something effective of it due to the obscuration of the karma being very strong. Very strong. So, experiencing karma and letting it pass is one thing. Doing purification practices and purifying the karma directly is much, much better. It's twofold. So do not think sitting around doing nothing, you collect no negative karma. Do not think that. Do not think that. Sitting around doing nothing is wasting the precious human body. If all you do is eat, run around for entertainment, go for movies, wash and clean and work and get a paycheck and have sex, and that's all you do, you are wasting your precious human body. And if your only accomplishment at the end of your life is 3 or 4 kids, look, that's what I made. Let me take you to the zoo. There are a lot of accomplishments there. Doesn't take brains to make something that looks like you. It's called DNA. So if you can run around saying, oh, look at my beautiful kids, that's the result of my life. You know, something that they're survived by his success in raising these kids. Oh, please. You create another beings coming to samsara. Thank you very much. And do you think those kids will grow up being wonderful little individual bodhisattvas and Mother Teresa's? I don't think so. They will grow up to be monsters just like you. What's the point? So if you think you've accomplished something just by raising kids or having kids, you haven't. You haven't. You have not. Like I said, if you did go to the zoo and take a look, there's a lot of other beings there who have accomplished what you've accomplished. And they have half the brains you had to do that. Think about that. Oh yeah, that's what Songrimji used to say. Nothing special, nothing different than us, nothing different than animals and us if we treat our life like that. Songrimji used to say. And the reason is the intent and the purpose of what we do with our lives. Think about it. So are we using our precious human life well? Or just using it for entertainment and wearing it out and getting old and waiting for death? Think about it. What are the things that occupy our minds? Our weight, how we look, what are we going to eat, who's going to call us, and where we're going to go on Saturday. That's what basically occupies our mind. Bodhicitta, oh yeah, bodhicitta. I vaguely remember what that is. On Saturdays, Avalokiteshvara does not exist. Only Hirukas that are unenlightened exist. And when we're depressed, see you later Dharma. When things are not going right, see you later Dharma. You see, anything goes wrong, the first thing to go is Dharma. Do you know why? Because our commitment to Dharma is not fully there. If we're busy, the first thing to go out the window is Dharma. Oh yes. If work takes over, the first thing to go is Dharma. Beautiful girl, Dharma. Hello, beautiful girl. Goodbye, Dharma. Money, goodbye, Dharma. Hello, money. Fun Saturday night got Dharma teaching. Thank you very much. I'm not well. I've got cancer. I've got diseases. Nagas have eaten me up. My dog took my Dharma book. The end. Why? We don't love ourselves that much the right way. That's not criticism. That is the Dharma. Dharma seems harsh, but it's the only thing that tells you the truth. To do something about it. That's the difference between karma that manifests and we experience and it gets finished, or when we directly purify our negative karma and it becomes purified. There's a difference.